about that. We do appreciate you guys coming. My friend Jeff Gore is here, and he's going to do some music for you. I had to bail him out of jail to get him here, but actually, Jeff's from Texas. He grew up in Texas, lived in Texas his whole life. Please don't hold that against him. Do we have anybody else from Texas here? I figured we did. That's good. Jeff has been playing music for well over 30 years, all around over the country. He's a cowboy preacher. He's just very active in the cowboy poetry circuit. That's where I met Jeff, I don't know how many years ago, probably 20 years ago, at Lubbock, Texas, at a cowboy gathering. And we've been crossing trails over the years as that. My name is Sam. Some of you know me. I do what I call cowboy gospel poetry. Jeff's asked me to do a couple poems here to let everybody get settled. And I thought, yes, I can tell everybody I opened for Jeff Gore. How many of you ever been to horse races? Anybody go to the horse races? Okay, well, some of you will know this. You know, horse racing, when I was a kid, we just raced our horses down the ditch bank, and most of us didn't have saddles. I rode on an Indian blanket. But anyway, as we got older, we got to go to the horse races. And I learned that horse racing was kind of a gambling event. And you go to a little window, and you bet on the horses to win, place, or show. If you bet to win, the horse that comes in number one, why, you win some money. If you bet to place, the horse can come in first or second and you still win some money. If you bet to show, the horse can come in first, second, or third and you still win some money. One of the things that I always am fascinated about the horse races is the names they come up with those horses. Some of them I wonder, where in the world did they come up with names like that? The other thing I've thought about horse racing is real interesting is, you know, they have a play-by-play announcer. And like any other sport, but the difference between horse racing and baseball, for example, that play-by-play announcing is a lot more rapid in a horse race. Here's a little poem I simply call The Race. I bought this old pony one time, and he was sure enough pretty fast. At eating up a half a mile, I figured he could last. I took him to the track, and I talked him up a bit. I tried him in his starting gate, and sure enough, he could fit. I looked all the other horses over, and he sure did look the best. I figure I'll just enter him up and put him to the test. I went to the window, and I placed 100 on him to win. Could be that today I'm a little smarter than I was back then. The horses was all in the starting gate. The owners, they was hoping. The jockeys tense, the gun went off, the starting gate went open. I'll get my share was in the lead, followed by don't leave me out. I'm somehow gotta pay for my feed. Around the first turn in third place was I Want Mine Now. She was running lap and tap with I'd like to catch up, but I really don't know how. Coming from behind was Eat My Dust, followed by Why Me, Lord? Oh, so slow was next to Things I Can't Afford. Things I Can't Afford was close to bringing up the drag. Then some jockey dressed in stripes passed them all on some old nag. Some old nag now took the lead, followed by Don't Give Up. The goal, of course, is that one horse would win the Golden Cup. Folks, to every race there is a finish line. And there's a message here to give. I'm yours, Lord, is the horse in life that's going to win there in the end. To every life, there is a finish line. To every life, a just reward. But unlike the horse race in life, it is not win, place, or show, but heaven above or down below. You know, I see I got a couple of youngsters here tonight. This is a little poem I do for the youngsters a lot. You know, around my place I am known as older than old. But I do remember stories that my old cowboy Uncle Noah told. You see, my old Uncle Noah was the first to bring cattle to the range as we know it today. In fact, he probably brought along the first seed and planted our first pastures to hay. The Lord looked down and he saw things in this world was getting pretty bad. He said, I'm going to have to drown them fools, and it makes me kind of sad. He searched for the good amongst them. He searched the whole darn herd, but he found only one, old cowboy Noah, who had paid attention to his word. The Lord said, Noah, I want you to build a great big boat because I'm going to pull the plug on the spring. I want you to load a pair of your best saddle horses, a pair of cows, a pair of sheep, in fact, a pair of everything. Noah, load in your some grub and some hay and cubes to feed the herd, because I'm going to drown the rest. You can mark my word. Well, the Lord was right, and the deluge came for 40 days and 40 nights. Old Noah, he just fed the herd, and he cleaned the stalls, and he did the chores upright. Folks, the reason for this story, the purpose of this yarn, is to let you know 'twas my old cowboy Uncle Noah who brought the first cattle to the range in his floating barn. Folks, let's welcome Jeff Gore up here, and he'll really entertain you.
Thank you, Sam. Sam's been a good friend for a lot of years, as he said, and we've crossed paths at a couple of different cowboy gatherings over the years, but Sam has worked for many years on the board for the Durango Cowboy Poetry Gathering right down the road here, and he's doing that for one more year, and I'm going to be there in October. So if you're around, you hadn't already headed back home, or if you're from this part of the country a little closer and you'd like to go to Durango the first week of October, I'm sure that they'd love to have you. We'd love to have you come here and sing and stuff like that there at the college there in Durango for the first weekend of October. It's first, second, and third, I think, is actually the days. So we'd love to have you come. Thank y'all for having me here at Fun Valley. I've known of Fun Valley since I was a little bitty kid. We used to come and play putt-putt golf and stuff like that when I was a kid, and we even came to some shows back in the old building, back in the old days before they tore it down or before it was changed. But we appreciate you having us. It's good to be here. I just appreciate Sam calling me a youngster. Oh, you weren't talking about me? Oh. I want to sing a little bit for you tonight. I hope that you enjoy it. In the lobby of a big hotel in New York town one day, a bunch of fellers telling yarns to pass the time away. They talked of all the things they'd done and the different sights they'd seen. Some of them praised Chicago town and others New Orleans. In the corner in a big armchair was a man whose hair was gray. He sat and listened eagerly to what they had to say. When they asked him where he'd like to be, his dear old voice did ring. I'd like to be in Texas for the roundup in the spring. 'Cause I can see the cattle grazing on the hills of early morn. I can see the campfire smoking at the breaking of the dawn. I can hear the broncos neighing, I can hear the cowboys sing. Oh, I'd like to be in Texas for the roundup in the spring. Well, they all sat there and listened to every word he had to say. They knew the old man sitting there had once been young and gay. And when they asked him to tell a story about his life out on the plains, he quietly removed his hat and softly began. I've seen them stampede over the hills. Do you think they'd never stop? I've seen them run for miles and miles till their leaders dropped. I was foreman on a cow ranch. That's the calling of a king. And I'd like to be back in Texas, boys, when they round up in the spring. 'Cause I can see the cattle grazing on the hills of early morn. I can see the campfire smoking at the breaking of the dawn. I can hear the broncos neighing, I can hear the cowboys sing. Oh, I'd like to be in Texas for the roundup in the spring. There's a place in sunny Texas where Molly Denning sleeps. There's a grove of mossy live oaks her constant vigil keeps. In my mind's a recollection of the long gone bygone days, where we rode the range together like two skipping kids at play. I hear her sweet voice call me in the watches of the night. I can hear her laughter freshening the dews of early light. I was foreman on a cow ranch, that's the calling of a king. And I'd like to be in Texas for the roundup in the spring. 'Cause I can see the cattle grazing on the hills of early morn. I can see the campfire smoking at the breaking of the dawn. I can hear the coyotes yelling, I can hear the cowboys sing. Oh, I'd like to be in Texas for the roundup in the spring. I was foreman on a cow ranch, that's the calling of a king. And I'd like to be in Texas for the roundup in the spring. What's the last thing that you'd part with? I once asked a cowboy pal, expecting him to tell me why that hoss in yon corral. Or maybe that brand new saddle he'd worked for years to get, or possibly his granddad's spurs, or that silver inlaid bit. Some of the fancy rawhide gear hanging in his saddle shed, or maybe even his roping skill, or that pretty girl he'd wed. Well, 100 things went through my mind, from boots to cold hard cash, but the thing he promptly answered was, this handlebar mustache. Took 35 long years, you see, to finally get her growed. No, it's vain. I kind of like this old mustachio. And there's hundreds out there like them on the western cattle range that cultivate this facial hair, and it ain't about to change. Oh, at times, let's see.
Eight cracks.
No.
Them out of range.
Oh, the things can be, I got it now. The things can be a nuisance when the winter time rolls in. You got two great big chunks of ice hanging way down past your chin. And in a while, your cold red nose will start to run and dribble. Before you can get your mittens off, that freezes in the middle. Your napkin gets a workout when the menu is soup or stew, and it sometimes gets discolored with tobacco if you chew. Then there's the long recovery time when it's singed by a branding fire, or a maddened wife with vice like grimps should demonstrate her ire. Now say you're shoeing horses and your bronc sets up a clamor, and one handlebar gets caught twixt claws on the downstroke of your hammer. Oh, the trials and tribulations of a man with a mustache are just the dues you gotta pay to possess that bit more dash. To receive the looks of wonder and awe from a kid with a peach fuzz lip, or little babies who don't control themselves and reach to get hold of it. But you know that it's all worth it, and you feel that you've come far when you see that dashing buckaroo in the mirror where you are. Oh, at times you might hear whispers. Them out of range will make cracks, but straighten up, pull out your tube, and add a little wax. That's called The Prized Possession by Joel Nelson. And Joel Nelson actually was nominated for a Grammy Award in the spoken word category with his CD called The Breaker in the Pen. Great poet, great writer, and he lost to Hillary Clinton reading the audio version of a children's book. Who was on that committee? That's what I want to know. Anyway, that was by Joel Nelson, called The Prized Possession. There was a fella that lived in Texas, in the panhandle of Texas, on the J.A. Ranch. The J.A. Ranch is a big chunk of the Palo Duro Canyon. It was started by Charles Goodnight in association with John and Amelia Adair, who were from Pueblo, Colorado Springs area, magnate, filthy rich people, and they happened to know Charles Goodnight, and he started a ranch for them in the Palo Duro Canyon back in the 1800s. And that ranch is still going today, still one of the big working ranches, still do things a lot of ways, the old way. But back in the 70s and 80s, there was a guy working there. He'd worked there 70 of his 91 years, actually. And except for a little short stint off in Korea, he was there his entire adult life. He didn't like living in the big town of Clarendon, or Claude, where his wife ended up living. So he lived out at the ranch, and he lived down in the canyon, down at the bottom of that canyon, in a rough old adobe kind of a shack kind of place down there. I haven't been to that camp, so I don't really know what it really looks like, but it evidently was pretty primitive, because after he died, they couldn't get anybody to live down there and take over that camp. They boarded it up and shut that camp down. But one day, the day after Christmas in 1989, when he was 91 years old, just like the other hands on the ranch, he took his turn with a couple of the young 2-year-olds every year and started colts. Everybody gets a couple of new 2-year-olds to start colts on, start them and get them going and break them and train them. And he was just like the rest of them. He took his colts every year to throw into his string and start colts. And so he was riding a young colt one morning, and he had a little old sandy spot down by the river where he'd circle and make a warm-up on his horse. And either before he went to check waters or after he checked waters and he had made that circle a little bit, he got to feeling sick or tired or whatever, and he laid down under a tree right there by the river, and that's where he died. That's where they found him. But that horse, that young horse, that hadn't had very many saddlings, he just a pretty young horse, was still well trained enough that he stayed right over there ground tied right by him, waiting on him to get up. He wouldn't leave him a foot. That spoke well if you know much about horses, and if you're much of the cowboy persuasion, you know that speaks a lot. But I wrote this about him after he died. He said one time, he was kind of soft-spoken, but he said, now, you know, if anybody ever asks you why you're a cowboy, well, they really wouldn't understand, or they'd have never asked in the first place. But I wrote this about him because they closed up that camp. It's kind of a sort of an image of the dying West, I think. You know, a change in the era. Charles Goodnight and Will James both lamented the dying off of the West and the disappearing of the cowboy, and yet now here in the 21st century, we got more cowboys and more horses than we've ever had in the history of this nation. But at the same time, things are a lot different than they were. And the fact that no one would live in the primitive conditions that old Tom Blasingame lived in at the bottom of the Palo Duro Canyon spoke to the end of an era. There was once a light in the window that shines no more. No one's riding herd on the canyon floor. Where there once was a line camp, there's boards across the door, 'cause the old man ain't riding broncos anymore. When old cowboys die, we shed a tear for a legacy that dwindles through the years. Another chapter's closed. Now all the cowboys know that the old man ain't riding broncos anymore. There's no broncs left in the pens out behind the shack. Now that the old man's gone, they've taken them back to the pens up by the big house, where they'll stay forevermore. 'Cause the old man ain't riding broncos anymore. When old cowboys die, we shed a tear for a legacy that dwindles through Another chapter's closed. Now all the cowboys know that the old man ain't riding bronco anymore. Another chapter's closed, and now all the cowboys know that the old man ain't riding broncos anymore. No, the old man ain't riding broncos anymore. When the morning comes, sun creeping up on the horizon, the cowboys jingling the horses, they come trotting in, and the day begins. And the day lies before you, and your life is too good to be true. You're living out a dream of generations gone before you, with a story played out time and time again. Sore-backed horses and sunburned men, sore-backed horses and sunburned men. And the day lies before you, and your life is too good to be true. You're living out a dream of generations gone before you, with a story played out time and time again. Sore-backed horses and sunburned men, sore-backed horses and sunburned men, sore-backed horses and sunburned men. I was interviewing Tom Morehouse for a TV show. Tom Morehouse comes from a pretty famous Texas ranching family, and there's a bunch of brothers that are in the cattle business, Tom and Bob and John, and their dad is named Togo Morehouse, and he was old school. He was kind of like what Tom Blassingame. He's pretty old school, and he was in this interview. Tom was telling this story. His dad was sitting up on this mesa on horseback with his banker, who was horseback with him one day, and they were bringing in this herd of cattle, and it had been a long, hard day. It's a long story how that ended up being that way, but those guys were plumb wore out. Those horses were dragging their nose on the ground, and those cattle were just having to push them every foot they went. It was a long, hard deal in that old rough pasture, the Croton pasture they call it there, and they were coming up through there, and that banker says, "Man, Togo, I can't believe you'd be so hard on them guys, make them move those cattle in this heat. You'd think they'd have bedded them up somewhere and brought them on in tomorrow." And he goes, "Buddy, I like sore-backed horses and sunburnt men." And the banker said, "Well, you ought to be a happy man today." Anyway, when he told us that story, I asked him if I could use that term. I said, "That's too good of a term to let go." And he goes, "I got a lot more where that one came from." As I said earlier, a lot of these ranches have changed over the years, but there has been times when they would take out the wagon, and especially in the spring and the fall. Spring for branding, and then the fall for weaning the calves and shipping the cattle. And they live off the wagon for a while in bedrolls and teepees and stuff. And I was honored to spend some time over the years here and there at the wagon with some of those big ranches, and that was a good deal. I wasn't raised in a cowboy family, but I tell people I got here as quick as I could. As far back as my mother can remember, I wanted to be a cowboy, and she had no idea where that came from. Or they kept thinking I'd outgrow it. And my mom, I'm going to be 60 next year, and my mom's about decided I'm not going to outgrow it. And if my parents ever thought there was hope to redeem me from being a cowboy, all hope was lost the minute I discovered the big outfit cowboy in West Texas, New Mexico, and then the buckaroos in Idaho and Nevada. It was over after that. There was no hope left for me at all. But this is a song I wrote for the guys at the Swenson wagon. The Swenson is a ranch there in Texas, pretty historic, pretty old. It used to be humongous. It's still pretty big, but it used to be just ever-loving humongous in its early years, back before everything got settled in Texas and there was still some open range. But I wrote this when I was spending some time at the wagon with those. I dedicated to them. But if you wondered about the term jingling in the horses, it comes from an old term where they used to put a bell around the neck of an old mare, because unlike the Western movies, it isn't the big black stallion that runs the herd. The stallions, they do their own thing. They're off being stupid somewhere. It's the old mare that runs the herd of wild horses, all right? And so the old mare is going to be at the top of the pecking order, period, whether you like it or not, all right? And so they put a big old bell around the old mare, and she'd be out in the dark out with that remuda of horses, and they could ride out early in the morning before daylight, and they could hear her bell jingling. They could go find her. And then they would get her caught and turn in, and they would go back to the wagon, and the horses would hear that bell, and they would follow her in when they heard that bell going. And so that was called jingling in the horses. Well, nowadays, very rarely are there ever any mares on the ranch. They use mostly all geldings, and they don't use the bell anymore, but they still call it jingling in the horses. Sitting by the wagon when the sun come up this morning, bacon, eggs, and coffee, biscuits, and beans. Cookie strikes the bell and he rings the world a warning. How them boys put food away beats all I've ever seen. Soon you'll hear the sound of two men jingling in the horses. We'll gather around a rope corral and listen for our names. Saddle up and ride out in single file together, feet in the stirrup and hand on the reins. And ride out on the morning, a king among men, sun on the rise and your face in the wind. Tall in the saddle, hoof beats the sound that matches your heart as you see your shadow on the ground. When the drive is over, we'll gather at the wagon. We'll eat a fried steak dinner with more biscuits and beans. Then in the evening, we'll sit around bragging about the things we've done and the places we've seen. Lying in my bedroll at night beneath the heavens, see the moon is shining and the stars as they gleam. Night horses neighing and the cattle are bowing, slip off to sleep and all night in my dreams. I ride out on the morning, a king among men, sun on the rise and your face in the wind. Tall in the saddle, hoof beats the sound that matches your heart as you see your shadow on the ground. Somewhere there's a crew of cowboys jingling in the horses. Somewhere around a rope corral they're listening for their names. One buck a little while the single file is forming, kicking and a spurring and he'll line out again. Right out on the morning, a king among men, sun on the rise and your face in the wind. Tall in the saddle, hoof beats the sound that matches your heart as you see your shadow on the ground. Tall in the saddle, hoof beats the sound that matches your heart as you see your shadow on the ground. From the day that I was born, I knew just what I'd be. There never was a question in my mind. When I was old enough to go and find my way, I left my home and family far behind. They cried the day I left and begged me not to go. Don't roam around this country all alone. But I've never been alone beneath the stars above. The prairie and the sky, they are my home. I ride across the valleys and the mountains tall, and I leave a dusty trail where I ride. I left it all behind for the cattle call, and I'll be riding down the trail the day I die. I've known a lot of horses in the years I've seen. Some were good and some were mighty bad. Rode beneath the lightning with 1,000 steers. The horse I rode was the only chance I had. The ones that guided me through, the ones I called the best, they were more than just a horse, they were my friend. The fighting and the bucking that came with all the rest made me love the good ones even more again. I ride across the valleys and the mountains tall, and I leave a dusty trail where I ride. I left it all behind for the cattle call, and I'll be riding down the trail the day I die. When my time on earth is done and they lay me in the ground, say their final words when I'm gone. I hope their words are kind and the final place I rest is the prairie with the moon and stars above. I ride across the valleys and the mountains tall, and I leave a dusty trail where I ride. I left it all behind for the cattle call, and I'll be riding down the trail the day I die. I left it all behind for the cattle call, and I'll be riding down the trail the day I die. is a region in the Northwest that makes up a big chunk of Nevada and Idaho and Oregon and even Northern California that's called the Great Basin. It's a place where when the flood receded, it left a huge deposit of water there for a long, long time before it finally soaked on into the ground. And there's crazy fossils of animals that shouldn't be in the middle of the United States of America floating around out there in that desert. It's a high desert, anywhere from 35 to 5,500 feet, a lot of sage, a lot of rolling hills. And right at the heart of it is a place called the Owyhee. And the reason it's called the Owyhee, that's O-W-Y-H-E-E, is because they didn't know how to spell Hawaii. Because there were some, I have no idea why, nobody knows why, there were some trappers for the Northwest Trading Company that was a competitor to the Hudson Bay Trading Company back in the Mountain Man days that tried their hand at mountain men trapping in that part of the country. These Hawaiians went off there and they were never heard from again because they either froze to death or the bears ate them or the Indians killed them or something. But for some reason that region took on the name Hawaii, but cowboys didn't know how to spell Hawaii. And so it's the Owyhee, and it's always been called the Owyhee region. The southwestern corner of Idaho, the biggest county I think in the whole state of Idaho is Owyhee County. And there's a town called Owyhee, Nevada, and it is considered the heart of that Great Basin. And the cowboys in that Great Basin, all cowboys kind of came from the Mexican vaquero, really, for the way we know cowboys today. They all kind of filtered up through the Americas from Central and South America. The vaquero in Mexico was the one that really started it all. And they went up through the cowboys in Texas and up through this part of the country. And then they also filtered up through the Baja and up through that part of Mexico into California. And the buckaroos in the Northwest, that's a transliteration of the word vaquero, by the way. Vaquero is the real terminology of the word, but they came to be buckaroo because we don't know how to talk. And so after a while it became buckaroo, and they like to be called buckaroos, not cowboys. And they take their vaquero influence from the California region as opposed to Texas brush country that most of the rest of the United States takes its cowboy influences from. I say all that to say that over the years I've been able to spend some time up there riding on some of those ranches and learned some of their ways and kind of have become a little bit of a hybrid of gear and way of doing practices by working up there and working down here and being from Texas. I'm still pretty much Texas cowpuncher, but they give me a hard time and I give them a hard time back about their flat hats and all the crazy gear that they use. Everything they have jingles and rattles and has horsehair and rawhide hanging off of everything. And we just got plain old leather stuff, you know, and so they like my fancy wild tooled saddle and I like their cool gear. But I wrote this song for that place up there, kind of our home away from home. We spend some time there every summer with some folks that I'll tell you more about in a little bit. Yesterday we rode out on the desert, driving cattle up to summer rain. The sunlight on my skin and the wind in my face proved to me once again some things never change. They say home is where your heart is and Texas is my home. Goodbye is the hardest thing I know. So I'll leave a piece of my heart here, and no matter where I roam, I'll make Idaho my home away from home. Tomorrow comes another time of leaving, and
You know how I hate to say goodbye, but I can't stand to see the look in your eyes. So I'll be gone before the dawn, before you even rise. They say home is where your heart is, and Texas is my home. And goodbye is the hardest thing I know. So I'll leave a piece of my heart here, and no matter where I roam, I'll make Idaho my home away from home. There's something about a place called the Owyhee, leaves me feeling lonely even when I'm all alone. 'Cause they say home is where your heart is, and Texas is my home. And goodbye is the hardest thing I know. And I'll leave a piece of my heart here, and no matter where I roam, I'll make Idaho my home away from home. I'll leave a piece of my heart here, no matter where I roam. I'll make Idaho my home away from home. I'll make Idaho my home away from home.
Though you're not exactly blue, you don't feel quite like you do in the winter or on the long hot summer days. Your feelings and the weather seem to sort of go together. You're quiet in the dreamy autumn haze. When the last big steer is goaded up the chute and safely loaded and the summer crew has ceased to hit the ball, well, it's then you go to dragging to the home ranch with the wagon when they finish shipping cattle in the fall. There's only 2 men left standing on the job for winter. Brandon, your partner, he's loafing at your side. You never hear him speaking, but you hear his brand new saddle creaking. You feel it's going to be a quiet ride. Oh, you savvy one another. You know him like a brother. He's friendly. He's just quiet, that's all. For he's thinking as he's dragging to the home ranch with the wagon when they finish shipping cattle in the fall. You got the saddle horses stringing and an easy walk, swinging in behind the old chuck wagon, moving slow. They're weary, gant, jaded. Through the mud and sage they've waded, and they've settled down to business long ago. Not a horse is feeling sporty. Not a horse is acting snorty. Well, back in the spring, them brutes were full of buck and ball. But now they're gentle as they're dragging to the home ranch with the wagon when they finish shipping cattle in the fall. The old cook leads the retreat, perched up high on his wagon seat with his old hat pulled down forward on his head. He used to make the old team hustle. Now he barely moves a muscle. Except fellow might imagine he's dead, except his old cob pipes are smoking, and he keeps that team a poking, hitting every hump and holler in the road. No, Cook ain't been a drinking. He's just sitting there thinking about the people and the places that he's known. You see the dust a trailing, and 2 little clouds are sailing, and a big mirage like lakes and timber tall. And it's lonesome when you're dragging to the home ranch with the wagon when they finish shipping cattle in the fall. You build your camp that night, you got a fire burning bright, but nobody really has a lot to say. Back in the spring, you sung and hollered, but now you get your supper swallowed and you crawl into your blankets right away. You see the stars are shining in the soft blue lining, and you sniff the frosty night air clear and cool. You hear your night horse shifting, and then your memory starts to drifting back to a little village where you went to school with its narrow gravel streets and the kids you used to meet. The common where you used to play baseball. Now you're far away and dragging to the home ranch with the wagon when they finish shipping cattle in the fall. Your schoolboy sweetheart too. She had eyes of honest blue. Best performer in the hometown talent show. Oh, you's only just a kid, but you liked her. Sure you did. Lord, that's only 40 years ago. Your mind begins to roam from old Mexico to Nome, from the Rio Grande to the Powder River. The things you've seen and done, some of them was lots of fun, but lots of other things that make you shiver. Like that kid named Reed got killed in a stampede. He's way up north. You helped him dig his grave. Your good friend Jim, the boss, got hung up on his horse and the boys couldn't reach in time to save. He was there when Ed got his, and the kid that killed him is still in prison. Lucky George is rich and living high. Poor old Tom got off the worst. Got his legs broke. Died of thirst. That must have been a horrible way to die. Winters at the ranches, springtime country dances. People there were sociable and gay. You used to lead them down the middle just a prancing to the fiddle. Never thought of going home to the break of day. No, there ain't much chance of sleeping when them memories come to creeping. Sometimes you think you hear the voices call, and a feller starts to drag him to the home ranch with the wagon when they finish shipping cattle in the fall.
Across the starlit divide and the North Trail ride, slowly it crawls while the cattle bawl. We're driving them down where the railroad is near, and the puncher is singing his song to the steer. So bossy, so there's grass all around, water easy found. Lights will draw the punchers like moths in a circle on the town. So bossy, so lay down, ooh-wee. Now the long trail is done and the shipping's begun, and we'll sit by the light of our campfire tonight. The stars are all shining, the moon rising clear. The puncher is singing his song to the steer. So bossy, so the long trail ends today. Us punchers goes to play. All you weary cattle may rest till they roll you away. So bossy, so roll away, away, away. When I was but a young man, I was wild and full of fire, a youth within my teens, but full of challenge and desire. I ran away from home, left my mother and my dad. It grieved them so to think that their only boy was bad. I fell in with an outlaw band, their names were known quite well. How many times we'd robbed and plundered, I could never tell. That kind of simple living can lead only to a fall. I learned that much and more the night I heard the master's call. One night we rustled cattle, 1,000 head or so, and started them out on the trail that leads to Mexico. When a norther started blowing and lightning flashed about, I thought someone was calling me, I thought I heard a shout. At that moment lightning struck not 20 yards from me, and left there was a giant cross where once there was a tree. And the this time I knew I heard a voice so sweet and plain, a voice that came from everywhere, a voice that called my name. So frightened I was thinking of the sinful deeds I'd done. I failed to see the 1,000 head of cattle start to run. The cattle they stampeded and were running all around. My pony ran but stumbled and he threw me to the ground. I thought the end was nearing, that death would be the price, when a mighty bolt of lightning showed the face of Jesus Christ. And I cried, Lord, forgive me, don't let it happen now. I want to live for you alone. God, these words I vow. My wicked life unfolded, and I thought of wasted years, while another bolt of lightning killed 100 head of steers. And the others rushed on by me, and I was left to live. The Master had a reason, life was his to take or give. A miracle performed that night, I wasn't meant to die. The dead ones formed a barricade, at least 6 or 7 high. And right behind them there was I, afraid but safe and sound. I cried and begged for mercy, kneeling there upon the ground. Pardon I was granted and my sinful soul set free, no more to face the angry waves upon life's stormy sea. Forgiven by the love of God, a love that will remain. I gave my life and soul the night the Savior called my name. I gave my life and soul the night the Savior called my name.
I want to give you a chance to sing along with me, if you would. You may not want to do that, but if you do, this is some old songs, some old gospel songs. If we sing one you don't know, don't worry, we'll get around to one you know in a minute, because we're going to cram a whole bunch of them all together. The first one may not be as well known as the others, and I was at a cowboy gathering in Lubbock, Texas a few years ago, a long time ago now, and a guy sang this song. R.W. Hampton sang this song at one of the sessions, and some people were kind of complaining that he had sung a gospel song at a cowboy gathering. You had never heard him complain about like that, have you, Sam? And this guy kept on going on and on and on about griping about him singing that, and R.W. was just standing over there. The guy may not have known he was standing there, but he still was making R.W. feel a little smaller, a little smaller, a little smaller. About that time, Richard Farnsworth, the old actor, was standing there, and he's a pretty good friend of ours, a pretty good friend of R.W.'s, doing really well, and he could see what was going on. And he never did talk very much. He's real quiet, but he spoke up and he said, well, I don't know. You know, Tom Horn was one of the best cowboys that ever lived. And they sang that song at his hanging. Life is like a mountain railway with an engineer that's free. We must make the run successful from the cradle to the grave. What's the curves that fills the tunnel? Never falter, never fail. Keep your hand on the throttle and your eye upon the rail. Blessed Savior, thou wilt guide us till we reach that blissful shore, where the angels wait to join us in that praise forevermore. Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away, I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. I took Jesus as my Savior, you take him too. I took Jesus as my Savior, you take him too. I took Jesus as my Savior, you take him too.
look away beyond the blue. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Look away beyond the blue. I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. Look away beyond the blue. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Do Lord, oh do Lord, oh do remember me. Look away beyond the blue. I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Good job. Good job. When she rode in, the music began and the crowd began to stand. She waved that flag above her head to the playing of the band. And I stood there on the front row with my hat in my hand as she rode by. And when old glory brushed across my face, it drew a tear from my eye. Oh Lord, heal our nation. Oh Lord, heal our land. Send your Spirit among us. Touch us with your loving hand. We've turned our backs on you, it seems, though only you can see. Make us once again the land of the free and the home of the brave. We finished the anthem and she rode away, and the cowboys began to ride. And I stood right there and I bowed my head, and from my heart I cried. Oh Lord, heal our nation. Oh Lord, heal our land. Send your Spirit among us. Touch us with your loving hand. We've turned our backs on you, it seems, though only you can save. Make us once again the land of the free and the home of the brave. We pray at ball games and rodeos, and we fight for prayer in school, until we're broken and praying from our hearts. We're only babbling fools. So Lord, heal our nation. Oh Lord, heal our land. Send your Spirit among us. Touch us with your loving hand. We've turned our backs on you, it seems, though only you can save. Make us once again a land of the free and the home of the brave. Make us once again a land I remember the day old Concho died, and I'd like to tell you about it if I may. Because it made me feel real strange inside, like I ain't felt since that day. We was alone there in the bunkhouse. He was sick, and I was aching from a bronch that throwed me the day before. About my keen riding skill, I'd been mistaken. And all the time we was there in the bunkhouse, he hadn't said a word. Till all of a sudden, though soft, it startled me when a break in the silence I heard. "Come over here, son," he gravely said, and I listened to his say about all the things he'd done in life and what he'd like to have done in his day. He talked of open ranges, places that he'd known, the big outfits he'd ridden for from Montana to Old Mexico. He talked about the friends he'd lost in Germany in the war. A tear rolled down his wrinkled cheek as he paused, and then he named some more. He asked me to read the Bible. Psalm 23, I believe. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And then he took hold of my sleeve and he said, "Son, let no man mock you when you pray to Christ our Lord, and look for all the answers in life within his holy word." Oh, roping skill and riding is important here in this life we live, but as we travel this journey, my son, there's something more important to give. Oh, teach those skills to the young ones, he said. And boy, he sure taught me. But leave with them also the knowledge you have of what Christ did for you and for me. He breathed in deep a couple of times, and then he sort of sighed, still clutching my arm, but with a smile on his face. He softly and quietly died. I'll never forget the things he said and how he made me feel that day. And I pray when it's my time to cross the divide, I'll make a young puncher feel that way. While I was out a-riding the graveyard shift, midnight till dawn, the moon was as bright as a reading light on a letter from an old friend back home. He asked me, "Why do you ride for your money? Tell me, why do you roll for short pay? You ain't getting nowhere and you're losing your shirt. You must have gone crazy out there." He said, "Last time I run on to Benny. She's married and has a good life. You sure missed the track when you never came back. She's the perfect professional's wife." And she asked me, "Why does he ride for his money? Tell me, why does he roll for short pay? He ain't getting nowhere and he's losing his shirt. He must have gone crazy out there." But they've never seen the northern lights, and they've never seen a hawk on the wing. They've never seen a spring hit the great divide, and they've never heard old Camp Cookie sing. I read up the last of my letter. I tore off the stamp for Black Jim. Billy rode up to relieve me. He just looked at that letter and grinned. And he asked me, "Why do we ride for our money? Tell me, why do we roll for short pay? We ain't getting must be crazy out there. 'Cause they've never seen the northern lights, and they've never seen a hawk on the wing. They've never seen a spring hit the great divide, and they never heard old Camp Cookie sing. Oh-da-lady, 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 Thank y'all very much. I appreciate you having me tonight. I want to introduce some folks that are here with us. Steve and Mary Cody are right over here, and JD and Lucinda Couch. They are friends of mine. We share some time on the road up in Idaho doing some tent meetings and some vacation Bible schools and cooking for the kids. My wife is right here, Donna. She cooks for the kids at Vacation Bible School. But this week we were right down the road at Moon Valley. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Saturday night at 7 o'clock, Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, but there's an added bonus. At 6 o'clock, if you come early, JD and Lucinda are cooking supper, all right? And then we have church at 7. Saturday morning, we have breakfast, Chuck Wagon breakfast at 8 o'clock, and a Bible study right after that, and then supper at 6, and 7 o'clock, church again Saturday night. 10 o'clock Sunday morning, we'll have service again. So if y'all are not doing anything and you'd like to, come right down there. We'd love to have you, all right? Thank y'all very much.
You know, I know most of you here are not cowboys, but I hope you know enough about the cowboy to recognize that you heard a real cowboy do real cowboy songs tonight. Here in hand. Now, we gathered a little bit of collection and got him here, but we need you folks to help him get home. He's got some CDs and some books over here, and there's a little white basket back there. If you got an extra buck or two in your pocket, if you'll toss that in the basket, it'll help him get back home. Thank you.